is going on in Ohio right now and in America as a whole. And I definitely think that's probably why we are all here tonight. We are all trying to understand and see how we can help. And there are a lot of voices in the conversation that we are having right now, and I have been very impressed with this particular voice. So I reached out to Mr. Pepper originally because of his shout out to Indivisible, specifically in his book, Laboratories of Autocracy, which is on sale here tonight. And he was not interested in just doing a Zoom call with our group. He wanted to come in person. And so we are very pleased to welcome David Pepper this evening.
It's great to be with Mia. We were together, and maybe a lot of you were with us. When I first got to know her, she was just giving them hell in 2017 outside of congressional offices, and I've been such a fan. Anyone else at those rallies outside congressional offices? Mia was when I first saw the power of indivisible and grassroots energy, and she was really the face of it, the leader of it. And I've been a fan of Indivisible ever since. You may or may not know this, but I literally, when I chaired the Democratic Party, after seeing the amazing energy in Indivisible chapters all over the state, I actually, at one of our Democratic county chair summits, I had a whole training session on how to work with these new groups, because they weren't very good at it. And one of the little lessons was, when these new groups come to your county and they want to get involved, don't ever say the words, well, this isn't how we do things. So it's one of the things that I think the broader sort of pro-democracy side needs to figure out, and that's why I brag about you guys in the book, is what an incredible new group of folks and energy that you're bringing. And I've loved speaking to Indivisible chapters all over the country. And there's an older generation of Indivisible that started after the first Trump victory. There's a whole new set now. You probably know this. I was in Indivisible Akron about 2 months ago that started in December of last year, and it's absolutely enormous. Absolutely enormous. So there's a real energy, and I love seeing it, and it's what we have to do. So I'll say a few words, and I know we're having a lot of questions and conversation. Can we just give a big round of applause for what happened yesterday? It is absolutely incredible and absolutely necessary. And so the Laboratories of Autocracy book, which sounds like some of you may have read, is all about diagnosing that the attack on democracy has gone on for decades. It took myself and a lot of us a while to see that the other side had a strategy rooted not in Washington but in state houses, that was where they were going to do most of their dirty work. It's what they've done, and we're living through that. And then I got a lot of people who read that book like you did and thought, that's great, David, what do we do about it? So I had to write a second book, the Saving Democracy book. And I recently laid out an updated Saving Democracy book, and we can talk about all that. And basically, it's called a user's manual. And one of my favorite things, the best way to compliment someone who writes a user's manual is when people come up to me and they have tabs all over to underline. That's like the greatest thing ever, and I have that happen a lot. So my goal was to say, okay, once we see the problem for what it is, and as bad as Mike Johnson and Trump may be, and we need to deal with that, the deeper problem is they've been attacking our country for far longer by controlling state houses, and we've lived in Ohio. Laboratories of Autocracy, if you haven't read it, is basically the Ohio story about how you can use a state house to undermine the rule of law and democracy and take a state that used to be kind of normal and turn it into crazy land, which we are. Once you see that, the way we solve it, I think, becomes a lot more clear. And the things that we've been doing wrong or with too narrow a lens also becomes clear. The second book is all about that. But I just want to start out by saying that, and this is why yesterday was so important, and we can talk about some of the nitty-gritty after. So, maybe one of the most important things that we all need to realize, and you all realize this or you wouldn't be here, is that what we are going through right now is not an aberration. We thought we were an aberration. I'm in my mid-50s. I was probably as guilty as anyone in my age group probably was of falling under the illusion that we were somehow, miraculously, the first generation of Americans that didn't have to worry about the state of democracy. We thought we were special. Well, you know, John Lewis got the job done. The Voting Rights Act saved us. The Warren Court saved us. So we were under an illusion that and I think people, elders, particularly African Americans, would have said to us, well, don't fall for that. That's not true. That's not our history. But I think there was a view that democracy was safe and sound. So while one side has been attacking it relentlessly in states all this time, Koch brothers and Alec, and you all know the story, the other side thought, you know, it's pretty strong, so all we have to worry about is winning some federal elections. And if we win those, like we did with Obama's victory, or even Biden, then we've won. And so we didn't really see the bigger picture that, no, actually, that's not winning the battle for democracy. It's much deeper. And it turns out that any one of us who thought that we were somehow the special generation that did not have to worry about the state of democracy, that was completely false. We are, and this is sort of sobering. I don't want to sound sobering on an exciting day. I actually find if you think it through, it's actually empowering. That we are just like every other generation. We must fight for democracy itself. We're not the exception. Politics isn't just about winning for a party you happen to be in. Ever, and not now. It's about fighting for democracy itself. And we have inherited from generations before us that battle. We now have the baton. And while that's sobering to realize, no, we're not the special ones who didn't have to worry. When you think about who came before us and what they had to overcome, you realize, well, we can do it too. I mean, as much as it feels every day, and I don't want to minimize any of it, but every day what Trump is doing, or all of it, is so outrageous, so lawless, so authoritarian, and that feels very heavy. But still today, as we proved yesterday, we are better positioned to get through it than the abolitionists were, and they got through it, than the suffragists were. And I start out one chapter at least about, I had a great-great-great-grandmother who was at Seneca Falls. Her story is fascinating. She lived in Seneca Falls. Her name was Rhoda Dennison Bement. Okay, I come from a long line of feminists, and I think it comes through sometimes in all that I do. She was in a church, an abolitionist church in Seneca Falls, and there was a Presbyterian church and a Methodist church, and she was in one that she was so fierce about abolition that she took on the minister in a way, and he was an abolitionist, but she took him on so fiercely that he was so offended, she was tried and found guilty of conduct unbecoming a woman and a Christian. And kicked out of her church. And she went down, and a group of women, she was in her 40s, a group of women followed her down the street to join another church. And that group of women was the energy that led to Seneca Falls. And you think about longer term, though, she in her 40s fought so fiercely. And even then, it was only her granddaughter at best who got the vote. So think about what all these folks had to overcome. And then there's, of course, John Lewis, civil rights, walking over a bridge, knowing he was going to get beaten or killed. So the point is, like, yes, it's sobering to realize we're in the same battle that they were in, but we also know they overcame it all to get us to the point that was so great that we took it for granted. So we are in the same battle for democracy that this country's always been in. And here's the pattern. And it's been the same from the very beginning. Whenever there is an uptick in the health and representativeness and diversity of our democracy, there's always a backlash. Clockwork. Reconstruction, Jim Crow. Voting Rights Act, Southern strategy. Obama, everything since. That's our history. So we're living in that pattern, and so in many ways, I said to the teacher the other day, we got to stop being surprised, folks. When we're surprised, it means we're not paying attention. Everything that's happening is a very clear pattern of history, and it's all written down in a plan called Project 2025. We shouldn't be surprised anymore. We know what they're doing. But the point is, we've always been in this pattern. There has always been a backlash as democracy grows and more people included, and particularly voters of color become the heart of a diverse democracy. What we see now, the suppression, the gerrymandering, the disinformation, it's always followed. Some of the patterns are so similar to what happened between Reconstruction and Jim Crow, it's scary. So there's a history, and we are part of that history, and now we have the baton. But here's why yesterday was so important. The history is very clear that we have windows where democracy rises and gets healthier and more diverse and more representative, and then we have windows of backsliding because of the backlash. And in our hands right now as a nation and as a generation we know we're in a backslide of some length, but the question is, how long is that backslide? There's no doubt it's happening. And the answer is, it's undetermined. A backslide can be Jim Crow, 80 years. Or it can be 4 years. And that's what's in the balance, right now. What we do, and I wrote this in January, that's why yesterday is such good news. What we do immediately in the backslide determines if my 8 and 11-year-old are stuck with it for their lifetime, as old as I am, or whether at 20 they're like, hey, Dad, what was that crazy stuff when we were 8? What was that? It's kind of a memory. That is in our hands right now, and history tells us that it's the faster you fight back successfully, the more likely it is it's a short window. If you don't fight back quickly, it settles in as the new normal. And memories, the collective memory of people in this country and our country shifts very quickly. And that's a dangerous thing. Because if we allow what's happening today, the crazy lawless gerrymandering, the suppression, the open racism, the lawlessness, the prosecution of political enemies, and the pardoning of George Santos, if we let all that set in as the new normal, and that billionaires running everything, Musk and Ramaswamy, all of that, if we let that set in as the new normal for 4 or 6 or 8 years, and we just sort of accept it, we all of a sudden will remember things differently. Oh, that's how it works. And our 18-year-olds will think, well, that's how it's always worked. And my kids will think, well, since I was 8, people lie and get elected, and people can be openly racist and benefit, and if we don't fight back in the first couple years, every year that goes by cements it into place, and then in 10 or 15 years, the people who say, wait, it can be better, are most likely they're the crazy ones. Because everyone else is saying, well, no, it's all we ever know. And the most haunting example of this I can give is, think about, and this is sort of an odd way to go about it, but think about a black teenager in 1880 in a southern state. A male, because women couldn't vote. Though that teenager would have seen in his community almost every fellow African American man, at least, registered to vote, voting. 62% turnout for the presidential election of black voters in the South in the 1880s. So a young man growing up would be like, hey, we're part of this. We're part of American democracy. Because after the Civil War, we had Reconstruction, they registered a whole lot of voters. Not only would that young man have seen people voting, he would have seen the majority of most of the state houses in the South would have been African American majority. Because the southern black population was so large and they were voting. You had African American speakers of houses, mayors, sheriffs, Supreme Court judges, justices, a member of Congress from the South for for 40 straight years in the late 1800s. And so that young man would have thought, well, then, I'm sure life was no doubt very difficult, a lot of racism. But that young man would have thought, okay, I am part of democracy. Once Jim Crow set in, a few years go by, early 1800s, the equivalent teenager in that same city, it's tragic, it's horrible to think about. No one he knows votes. Every single black elected official, because of that, gone. Separate but equal in place. Jim Crow, apartheid in place. Nobody this person knows votes. And that young man, the world where people voted is gone. It's forgotten. And if that young man says we should start voting, people think, this is not the world we're in. 20, 30 years later, it completely changed. And that young man, by the way, by the time he was 80, the big progress, even though someone right before him saw everyone voting, was that Jackie Robinson got to play baseball. That's the danger of letting things settle in. And what happened that led to that terrible story? The North stopped fighting. And quitting on democracy led to the world turning upside down. And so the point is, the earlier we go, the earlier we fight back, the better chance we have, longer term, of not allowing it to settle in. And that's why yesterday was so important. And that's why next year is so important. This is our first and best chance to counter what's happening. And there is no better time than the midterm immediately following the dark moment where Trump won and they won the Senate House. This is the time to strike. And what was so great about last night, who's been at No King's rally? I'm sure everybody. Awesome. I'm not surprised. What is so amazing about all this is that we are doing exactly what needs to be done to stop the darkness before it settles in any longer. And so the most important work we have in front of us was yesterday. It's continuing the protests. It's all the pro-democracy work we do between the protests. It's recruiting the running Republicans in every single district. And it's fighting back as hard as we can everywhere next November. I'll just close with this because we can talk about a lot. Every time there's a protest, not every time, but a lot of times, I wore one of these town hall meetings and hopefully get to some of those. The chatter on the national TV is, oh my gosh, that person gave such a great speech, one of the senators from Washington. Maybe they'll run for president. We add one more person to the short list for being president. I could care less about the presidency right now. About 20. I want to win the presidency, but that's too far away. We got to save democracy this year and next year. This is when we save it so we have a shot of winning in 28. This is when we save it. Right now. And so, when I see a big protest in a No King's rally, the beauty and potential of the protest isn't the speaker who gets talked about being on a short list somewhere. It's the crowd. In that crowd are the folks who are going to save democracy. And so the challenge as we go forward, this group and No King's rallies, and I've spoken at probably every single one. I never end up on a short list for anything, but I do get fired up. The opportunity of these crowds are the protests themselves. But it's the fact that in every one of those crowds are people who go back to Laboratories of Autocracy. We have a crisis of uncontested races. We have a crisis of not caring about too many kinds of races for state house and local, which, by the way, we overcame yesterday. In those crowds are the people who will be running for all those offices we often don't care about. And in those crowds are people who maybe don't want to run themselves, but could help those people. And in those crowds are people who could literally be registering voters every single day in whatever they do in life. And the beauty of the movements we're seeing is that there's a potential pro-democracy work in so many ways that save democracy at the nearest possible moment, which is yesterday and next year. So yesterday was the beginning of the midterms. It could not have gotten off to a better start, I believe. So let's keep right on rolling into 2026, our best and next chance to save our democracy. Thank you very much for this. I fired about yesterday.
connect with in everything that you say is our place in history, the historical context. This has happened before, and we've gotten through it, but it also makes what we're doing today so important, and it really gives me a lot of energy because it's big. It's part of our legacy as Americans, yeah.
Well, let me say on that, I believe that once you see it the way I've described it, our lives have more meaning than we ever probably thought they would. We are literally playing roles in history that 20 years ago I wouldn't have thought of my life in that way. But we all are playing a massive role in our history. We fit right into it. Now, again, I think we're stationed better than when John Lewis had to walk across that bridge. So I don't think, knock on wood, we'll have to make decisions like he did. But I believe our lives have more meaning than we ever imagined once you see the battle for democracy is what it is.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll dive into it because we have got some really fantastic questions. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question. So I'm just going to start with some questions that were put together by Indivisible Central Ohio, kind of our active membership chat. They had some things that they were interested in talking about. So I'll dive in here because I know that audience members are interested in this question as well. Rural people have been left behind by the Democratic Party. You spoke about this a little bit already. What do you feel like the impact of this has been? What can be done to rebuild trust and engagement with these voters? And is there anything that you're aware of in current efforts that's aimed at doing this?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I completely agree. We basically, if you read Laboratories of Autocracy, and you think about the bigger picture, I think Democrats, we basically adopted a strategy, sort of efficient, cost-effective, blind to the threat of democracy that, if all we do is win like swing districts for federal office, we save democracy. We win congressional majorities, we go to 7 states that are the swing states, we go for Senate races and presidential electoral college votes. And if we win those, everything's great. And anything else is a waste. And I still hear this because I talk to someone else. And that decision that the only thing that matters are the swing districts and the swing states for federal office meant we basically decided, why go to rural? It doesn't matter. It's not going to change the equation of winning that federal-only battle. And so for 20 or so years or more, we basically were we weren't even really engaged. And there was a mindset, really, that spending money in those areas was a waste. And what's happened over the course of it, and I have a chart in the books, we've left it completely as a matter of running for office. I'll just give an example. Did you see a couple years ago when the Tennessee legislature kicked out their 3 colleagues? And I thought, and I study all this stuff, so I thought, I bet you I know these people. And I thought, let me see how many of these Tennessee legislators, the colleagues were talking about, you may remember, gun safety after a school shooting. Right. And they marched with people. That's why they got kicked out. 80% or more of Americans want common sense gun laws. 90% of gun owners want background checks. So if you're kicking people out for a week for common, you're just out of touch. So I thought, who are these people? It turns out 50% of the Republicans in the Tennessee legislature had not even been contested in the prior election. 50%. We don't even run against people. In New Orleans, in Louisiana, it's like 65%. Mike Johnson has not been in a re-election his entire life. His first election to the State House, both the primary and the general election were uncontested. We'll talk about a great life. His re-election for the State House in Louisiana, election isn't even the right term for it, it's an appointment, uncontested. His next 3 races for Congress, massively gerrymandered districts. His next, uncontested. His next office is Speaker of the House. But we are leaving all across this country. Ohio we've left traditionally, about when I was chair, we had 0 uncontested in 2018. I was very proud of that. We've been at about 20%. That's actually way ahead of most states. 40%, 50%, uncontested. And what that means is we're not even there. And when you're not there, you're not listening. You're certainly not messaging. You're not knocking on doors to get people out. The only thing they hear, as you would know, is what the other side says about us. So when there's public schools are falling apart because of their policies, when health care is too expensive because Jim Jordan won't support ACA premiums, subsidies, and no one's running, they just say, well, it's the Democrats. You know, your schools are falling apart because of critical race theory. Things that make no sense. No one knows it's because the State House is giving all the money away. And so when you're not there, you're not in tune. It lets them sort of culturally attack us, make us seem like the other. And when you're there and you have the right candidates, you could have a 25-year history teacher who everyone knows running, and all of a sudden, all that bad information, all that divide and conquer goes away. So we basically decided a number of years ago that this was the better strategy, and I hope we're learning that that was a disaster. And when you think about, if you believe my Laboratories of Autocracy theory, that most of the worst stuff is through state houses, and let's just be clear, that's where the worst is happening. Very little happens. They pass a big ugly bill. Every couple of years they pass a bad bill. But for the most part, the filibuster stops everything. The bad stuff is state houses. Almost every major attack that's extremist or against democracy is coming out of the state house. Dobbs, Mississippi, state house. Voter suppression, attacks on public schools, attacks on universities, it's state houses. And almost all of the drive for all of that is happening in districts that have largely been uncontested. And when it's uncontested, they face no accountability. They actually are incentivized to be extremists because they only worry about their next primary. So it's like a super highway. If I was standing up, I'd say this. It's like a super highway of extremism where it all happens, and we stand back and say, go right on through. And that's why we're so disconnected. So how do we change that? There's a lot of things we can do, but the most important is to start running in more places. And this, I'll close with this, and this long answer. Virginia, last night, had a banner night. Right? You know what Virginia did last in this cycle? Does anyone know? 100 districts. They ran in every district. They knocked on doors in every district. They listened in every district. They got turnout up in every district. And they didn't just win a governor's race. I think they flipped like 10, 11, or 12 seats. And that's how you start getting back. And what I ran into a winner, so I started something called Blue Ohio. We give money to people running in the hardest districts. People don't run because we even value them running. We don't give them any money. Why would anyone run? We have Blue Ohio. We pull money together from small dollar donors, and we give it to the hardest districts first. The swing districts will have money. We need to help the people who don't have any, and where they live, there's no money to scratch to give them a campaign. Indiana started the same thing. I ran into a woman about 3 months ago in Indiana, and she said, we're running in every district in Indiana, and I'm one of them, and I'm in a really rural district. And I said, that's wonderful. What are you running for? She said, what are you running on? She said, oh, it's easy. I'm running how they're destroying our public schools, and that we only have public schools in my district. I'm running on how healthcare costs are out of control, and in my district, everyone's talking about that. And you know what else she said? And I'm running on the fact that property taxes are high because the Indiana State House is stuck local with all the bills. If you're running, you get to run on the issues that are do matter in those areas. If you're not, you let them. That's what we do everywhere. And if we do that well, I think we start to listen better, but we also start to campaign better, and we realize that the very issues she mentioned in that very rural district are what you also talk about in urban Ohio too. There's so much commonality, but we don't see it to be advantage. My hope is Virginia yesterday, North Carolina a couple years ago, people are starting to see that that old strategy of federal only is a mistake, and running everywhere, starting the state house level up, is how we're going to turn this around.
Rural and urban, our issues are all the same.
Yeah. If we're not there, we give them an opening to make it also different. But if we're there, we're focusing on affordability, healthcare, schools, and in that case, they're all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So, while we are being outspent by billionaires on one side of politics, we are seeing a surge of grassroots activism and renewed progressive engagement on the other. what are the best ways to harness and support this energy?
So people ask about Citizens United a ton. I agree that we need to overturn it, either a court that does it or constitutional amendment. But we are seeing that we can match their ridiculous billionaire dollars with our grassroots energy. And this is why I've written these books. But we have to be smarter about giving a game plan on how to best use that energy. And if all we do is use the energy, and by the way, our small dollar givers, when motivated, outperform their big dollar people. We've seen, races where Senate candidates raise $100 million almost entirely from small dollar donations. But what we haven't done well, this is why this Blue Ohio thing I mentioned, I think is important in other states, and what they did in Virginia was they were raising money for those tough districts. We have to have a bigger game plan that says, okay, grassroots energy, don't just focus on 5 celebrity Senate races. That's not enough. We've tried this strategy for years. If only we won enough U.S. Senate races, we're going to save democracy. How's that turned out? It's not enough. So we need to help our grassroots energy, like I said, these rallies or wherever, we need to have them see the bigger picture threats to democracy and start engaging at the key points, which is local on up, and not only the U.S. senators that appear on Rachel Maddow. And I think if we do that, then all of a sudden you can round, and all of a sudden someone running for State House has $40,000 as opposed to $5, and they can run a race like they did in Virginia. And all of a sudden there are all sorts of other things that start to fill in. As opposed, again, we have trained ourselves for generations that the way we save democracy is these federal offices, and that's it. And our grassroots folks, I think they see it differently, but we still have to do a better job of getting that broader vision of saving democracy out, so people know whether it's their energy, their treasure, whatever, they apply it to a broader strategy and not the old one that didn't work as well as we needed to.
Right. Well, keep in mind that that's a loop as well. If regular people feel like their issues are being addressed, they're going to be much more inclined to give the few dollars that they can give.
Yeah, and another point on that is, once you see that it's a battle for democracy for State House, it's empowering because that means everyone in America is part of the battle. I'm literally I'm like a red state. I'm sort of I have a lot of fans in red states. Because I go to their states and I say, I know you feel overlooked, but I know that you're on the front line of democracy. And if you may not turn red for a Senate race here in Oklahoma, when I spoke in Oklahoma or Indiana, but if you go from 20 uncontested races in Oklahoma to 5, you're making major progress. So let's get that done. And so the truth is, once you see the battle for democracy the right way, that Oklahoma Democrat doesn't only get to give to Sherrod Brown to feel like they're making a difference. There's work to do in their community. And when we give the disempowering view that, it's only about 5 Senate races, most of America thinks there's nothing we can do, so why get involved? And we are seeing now in California, who helped save democracy yesterday? California. They often don't feel relevant. We saw 3 Mississippi seats flip yesterday. The broader, for the State House, the broader battle for democracy, once you see where it's really being waged, the Koch brothers have been playing in these states for years. They know it's everywhere. We've told ourselves it isn't. And that's really disempowered a lot of people from seeing there's much more they can be doing than they've been told they can be doing.
We've got some really great questions tonight. So I'm actually going to
I'll do a speed round. I apologize for going.
No, you're fine. I'm going to cut short our planned questions and just dive right in here because I'm really excited about some things that people have turned in. I feel like you've kind of spoken to the first part of this question, but does this political time remind you of any other time? What do you imagine, and I'm sorry, this is from Steve. Thank you, Steve. What do you imagine a positive outcome will look like when we get through this time? What is a positive outcome?
So the first one is the parallels to what led to Jim Crow are absolutely horrible. In Reconstruction, they said, African American voters are engaged in widespread voting fraud. So they made it a lot harder to vote. They undermined the 14th, 15th Amendment, bold declarations of a new democracy with rights. The Supreme Court completely eviscerated them. That's what the Supreme Court's done with the Voting Rights Act. in the parallels, and of course, usually what they're trying to censor from our history are the parallels. They basically want to remove the parts of the past that were not good, and that means we don't recognize the similarities now. So, but when I teach my election law course, I sort of I do a little good trouble. I don't know if the legislature would want me to do this, but I go through all the history. Most of my students aren't going to become election lawyers, but I want them to know the history, not just the good stuff, but all the stuff, the back and forth. So yeah, there are a lot of parallels that are scary but instructive about what we can do. Like I said, once you know that history, you shouldn't be surprised by anything what's happening. It's like clockwork. What do I hope? I hope we get to a system, and I mentioned California, but let me be clear, no one should gerrymander anywhere. Okay, let's be very clear. It's horrible. I think we should fight fire with fire. But the North Star from our side must be that no one gerrymanders in any state. Oftentimes Republicans say to me, like it's a trick question, well, what about Illinois? I'm like, oh, I think it's bad in Illinois. Like, I don't like gerrymandering. I think it leads to terrible government, lack of accountability, worse results, and often corruption. Once there's no accountability back to the people, the special interests are in charge. The special interests grab public assets for themselves, be it vouchers, FERC energy, whatever. The outcomes fall for everyday people, but because they're gerrymandered out of having influence, the people can't stop it. It's a downward spiral. It's happening everywhere. When they call state houses public service, that's not even what it is. A gerrymandered state house in Ohio is private service. They are using public assets, public power to benefit private players. The public is completely ruled out of this equation by gerrymandering. So when you ask me what do I hope to get to, of course I don't want Donald Trump in the White House after 28. I think J.D. Vance is a very flawed candidate, so I think we can beat him. I think we can win the House and Senate. But as we've seen in the past, that's not enough. Winning in 20, and I wrote Laboratories of Autocracy in 2021. Most people thinking about democracy the old way would have thought, why are you writing that now? We just won everything. And I was warning people, no, we still have a gerrymander House State House, and all across the country what's like it, and they're going to continue attacking. So the longer-term answer is we have to unrig the states and bring democracy back to states. The state of Ohio is not a democracy. It's not a republic either. It's neither. We also have no rule of law. This is not a state that meets any definition of the rule of law. So you can only get gerrymander maps like last week that are, again, illegal and unconstitutional if you have neither a democracy nor the rule of law. So I think to your question, I think if we're really going to get ourselves out of this jam, it's not just the 26 and 28 elections for federal. It's that over time, we unrig these states and get them to be rule of law democracies again. And by the way, if that means in Ohio or another state, Republicans win because they won a majority in fair districts, fine, that's democracy. But if they're winning because they blocked it all up and they're changing the rules of the Supreme Court so the Supreme Court doesn't strike down blatantly unconstitutional maps, we will, even if we win the federal stuff, we are not a democracy yet. There's one little part of my Laboratories book that you might have read. Has anyone heard of the guarantee clause? Okay, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. I'm going to monologue, gig out for a second on everybody. It says, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a Republican form of government. Guarantees. There is no other clause in the U.S. Constitution that says words shall guarantee. It says the United States shall guarantee. This clause came before a semicolon that then said, and shall protect states from foreign invasion. But before the invasion part, which is sort of a big deal, came, we shall guarantee that every state in the Union will be a Republican form of government. And by Republican form of government, Republicans sort of, some of them at least, try and twist the meaning of the word republic to mean what it doesn't. They meant representative democracy, as we would call it today. That we elect people who represent us, as opposed to the monarchy. And the reason the founders guaranteed that was because they understood the very threat we face now was that the states were given so much power over drawing districts, over voting, over substance. They worried that if states ever fell into the hands of what they described as rich, privileged interests, or the monarchy, today we would call it Alec and the Koch brothers, they knew that if states fell into the grips of a non-republic form of government that was controlled by special interests and wasn't anchored back to people, that the entire enterprise of our nation's democracy would fall apart. It's in the Constitution. They knew the risk that we face now. They actually expected the federal government to do something about it if it appeared, and they don't. But the point is, when you ask what's the end state that makes me feel like we're getting the right place, it's not having Trump stay in power, but it's living up to a guarantee in the Constitution that every state in America is a republic. And right now, not even half of them are. So we got a lot of work to do.
Well, and when we get back to a same place, codifying in law protections for these democratic institutions, shoring up things that have eroded, and passing new legislation to protect that. So I'm going to ask a question that seems to be on quite a few people's minds tonight. I'll ask, I'm not sure whose question this was, but is there a lesson for progressives and Democrats in yesterday's New York City mayoral election? And then Mark asks, in your opinion, what does Mamdani's win mean for Democrats?
That's a great question. There's a whole debate around the country about what it means. And you asked about rural Ohio before. Like, my guess is you wouldn't win rural Ohio. Maybe you would. I think we go to learn a ton from the way you campaign. And there really is, and I see it now, there really is an industry of campaigning that sucks a lot of the life out of campaigns. And I don't know who helped him with this campaign, but it felt very authentic. It felt very just direct to the people. He didn't do what a lot of folks, I think, tell people in campaigns to do. And look how it worked. He caught fire. He's also younger, and he clearly knew how to talk to younger people. He was fearless in many ways about his policies. But I also think, and this is why I would say, I don't think we should think of a one-size-fits-all. He clearly was in tune with his community. And my guess is, if we talk about a rural candidate, we talk about something different. But we need people running who are in tune with their community. And that's, we got the Republican Party of Ohio already running, social media, like, Sherrod wants to be the Mamdani of Ohio. I mean, it's the silliest thing. By the way, this is why they're losing. They don't really, I think, at this point know what to do. But I think a lot of it is find candidates who are in tune with their community. And if you're running everywhere, that does mean that in some communities, the person will actually have disagreements with one another.
Right.
And that's fine. We're a Big Ten party. But if we are consistent on one thing, they're the ones with the special interests, and we're connected to people. And if we're connected to people in a rural district, we know that talking about public schools and health care and costs, and maybe the fact that property taxes are going up because the state house won't do its job, is the best messaging. And maybe in New York City, it's what he talked about. So I think as long as we're committed to finding candidates who are legitimately, authentically tied to the people and good at communicating about that, our candidates may look and sound different, but that's how you start winning everywhere. And so I think, and there's a lot in terms of the mechanics and how he did it. I will say, this is going to sound rude, like, whoever thought running Andrew Cuomo was a good idea should never appear in politics. I mean, people, some people in New York didn't want him to win, didn't want Mamdani to win, then don't run Andrew Cuomo. He was an absolutely horrific candidate. I can't imagine who thought that was a good idea. But I think Mamdani, to his credit, was authentic and clearly in tune with the people of New York in a way that cut through and led to turnout people didn't expect, energy he didn't expect, and a true coalition across many divides. And now he's mayor. So I think we need to find candidates who can do that in whatever community they're in.
Say diversity of candidates to connect with the diversity of America.
Yeah.
No.
You couldn't look at yesterday without thinking that. I mean, there have been, I think, 74 consecutive male governors of Virginia. Now we've had the first woman. One going away. Let's give a round of applause. You have those like Cyril and Spanberger winning in ways that men a few years back who were Democrats didn't. So they did better. And I think that diversity matters. You have your first, I think, Muslim American statewide winner in the lieutenant governor of Virginia. You obviously have Mondami winning. And I do think, again, the reason for the suppression we've seen since 2008 is the rise of a diverse democracy. But the diversity of democracy, that's where the people are. So if you represent it as a party, you do better versus trying to, avoid it, which some Democrats still kind of want to do. But I think that being reflective of the diversity of this country, which is the majority of this country, longer term is actually the path to success.
Right, absolutely. All right, this was a question that was asked a couple of different ways by our audience as well. It seems that older folks are more involved to fix things than younger adults, and thank all of our older folks here tonight. Do younger folks distrust the system, and how can we be motivated?
Yes.
How can we reinvigorate younger engagement?
It's part of what I was saying before about collective memory. I had this is going to be worse now than it was then, but when you must know from Akron, Vernon Sykes. Amelia Sykes' father. He's probably now more famous for being her father, but Vernon Sykes was an amazing state house member, state senator. He also would organize a group of interns every year that he would bring around the state house. And he had me present to this group of interns. They were a diverse group, I think 18, 19 years old. And about a month before the 2016 election, I was saying to them, and this was right after the first round of how outrageous Trump was. When it first came, Muslim bans and the wall, back then people realized it was outrageous. Now it got normalized up. All that stuff. And I said to this group of young people, maybe a little self-righteously, the reason why those of us my age are so, worked up is because none of this is normal. And a young woman, I give her credit, I'm glad she did this, because sometimes people just let comments slip. A 19-year-old woman, an African-American woman, raised her hand, she said, Mr. Pepper, to us this is all normal. It's all we've ever known. By which she was telling me, when I was 11, they were questioning if the president was an American because of the color of his skin. Right? I mean, she'd known that since 11. And then it made me think, born around 9/11, Obama, they're trying to prove he's not an American. All the Trump stuff, white supremacist violence, Trump surging. And then a month later, that young woman, while I was saying this is all about normal, sees the man win. So young people, all they have, and let alone gun violence, skyrocketing loans, can't afford a home in your 30s. Yeah, they think it's terrible. And if we think, again, this is maybe an admission that the title Saving Democracy is not the best one. If we think you're saying to them in a 30,000-foot way, let's go save democracy, a lot of them are thinking, well, why? It hasn't been that good. It looks terrible. Why would we ever enter politics? It's horrible. So we've got a lot of work to do. I do think we've seen some progress, though. When we are smart about connecting the health of, and this is a lesson beyond young people. As much as I want to save democracy and we talk about it in the room in this way, as a matter of talking to voters who've sort of given up on democracy, or on just general voters, connecting democracy to things that really matter in everyday lives is really important. And so after Dobbs, there's such a connection between the lack of democracy and Dobbs and abortion bans. In a world where we have referenda, we've learned abortion access is protected because that's what most people want. It's only in a world of no democracy that you have abortion bans. You could do a poll in any state in this country, and, except for maybe a few, but I think almost none, you would have a protection of a woman's right to choose. So the lack of democracy is really important in what's happening there. But make the connection, but in 2022, the reason we had such a blowout year across this country was in post stops, and young people showed up in much higher numbers because they saw, oh, this is affecting us. So I think we have to do a much better job. Do not assume that young people are running around saying we got to save democracy, because politics is absolutely broken for them. And they're paying the price of that brokenness more than we are. They're the ones dealing with climate change for their whole lives. They're the ones dealing with the lack of a tax base, which is giving all money away. Their public schools are being robbed of money. Their rights are being infringed upon. So they are paying the price. They clearly have seen the worst of it. My worry is the young people we want to enter public service will say, why would we ever do that? And the people we don't want, like Vivek Ramaswamy and J.D. Vance, thinks it's just wonderful to do it, because it's like the house of cards. So we've got a lot of work to do. They really have a negative view of it. And we have to, I think, by not assuming they're into it, by connecting it to issues that really matter every day, and then in office doing something about those issues. That's how I think we start to, and Mamdani, he obviously was able to do that. And other officials, other leaders were able to do that. And that's also where it's important to run everywhere, because a lot of the progress, you're not going to see the federal level. It's so broken. But that new mayor, that new council member, that county commissioner, they may be the ones who convince young people, wow, I love that person, they're close to my age, and I can see it making a difference. So at all levels, I think we have to be engaging young people and not assume that they get why we think democracy is so important.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask this question because I think it might have been Mia's question. You advocate for running everywhere all the time. Of course, the members of ICO like this idea, but the reality is that our resources, time, energy, money are limited. How do we strike a balance between running everywhere and focusing our attention?
So I think we've made a mistake for years to assume it's a zero-sum game. And what we saw happen in Virginia was once they were running in all 100 districts, it got people so excited that people gave more. There was someone I know really well who was the one who recruited half those very rural candidates in Virginia. They created a website called like the 27 candidate pack, not as in Political Action Committee, but PACK. And they made it easy. You go to the website and give, and you could give to that group in a way that the money got divided amongst all the 27 hardest to run. And they raised more money than the rest of the legislative candidates. And I don't think the rest of that money I don't think the money would have gone to anybody. The idea of running in those rural areas got people so excited that they gave more. Now the ones in the swing districts are getting a lot of money anyway, because they're in that's sort of a close district. But I found this with my Blue Ohio. So the way we do Blue Ohio is we crowdfund. And if anyone's interested, we'd love to have people join. Look at blueohio.org if you're interested. We have a monthly meeting. We're always interviewing candidates and talking to officials, and we talk about property taxes and school and vouchers and all that. But the heart of it is everyone's giving them $800 a month, and they do it because we take that money and we call it our reverse bathtub model. We start with the worst districts, the one that no one ever runs in, and we say to that candidate, "Oh my gosh, you're running in a district that no one's contested in 3 terms. Thank you. You are a hero for democracy, and we are here to give you the biggest check you have." And we then work our way up. Last time, this group, $8 to $10 a month, we raised $400,000. We were one of the 3 or 4 largest givers to state house candidates in Ohio. And we weren't looking for anything but democracy. And we gave it to people who otherwise get almost no support. We gave to 56 candidates. I think we were the largest contributor to 50 to 57. That money wasn't going to go flowing somewhere else. These were people inspired by the idea that we should run everywhere. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I think that it's about sort of the energy of running in more places, builds more support, builds more energy, leads to more postcards, leads to more stories of inspiration, and does lead to more support. If it was a zero-sum game, I would still say we should do it. Like, this is going to sound kind of crass, but Amy McGrath ran for Kentucky senator. I don't fault her for that. I don't fault her for raising a lot of money. She raised about $100 million. Let's assume it's a zero-sum game. Just give me $20 million of that 100. and I could fund every state house candidate in 4 states surrounding that. And that 20 million on top of the 80 is just a rounding error on TV buys that are already kind of saturation. So even if it was a zero-sum game, I'd say it's worth it. Because we're over-investing in some ways in celebrity-style races. And we're under-investing in strategic races that in many cases have more impact on democracy because, in Mississippi, they picked up 3 seats. That ends the Mississippi supermajority. In Ohio, if we pick up 6 seats, we can hold a veto if we win a Democratic governor. In North Carolina, in 22, they picked up 1 seat. They fought hard for that seat. And it allowed a new governor in North Carolina, and they ran in all but 2 districts in North Carolina. That's one reason they picked up that seat. It allowed the new governor to have his veto count for something. So for far less money, in states where democracy is in the balance, you can pick up these seats. And so even if it was zero-sum, I say it's worth it. But I actually think you grow the pie when you run in more places.
All right. Well, we have some pretty intense questions here, so I guess we're done with the softball questions. We have a question that's about Citizens United, and I'm struggling. This is Michelle's question. I'm struggling on the group that is sponsoring this initiative, but there's a new approach to short-circuit it that's based on states having the power to define and redefine what corporations can and cannot do. Montana is close to getting an initiative on their 2026 ballot that would end dark money spending in that state. Thoughts on Citizens United?
That's an awesome question.
Yeah.
I love that idea. I worry about the U.S. Supreme Court, what it will do with anything like that. Because it's First Amendment. You can't even stop it as a state constitutional matter. But I love the idea that you use corporate laws in states to say what states can and cannot do. If there was, I would support a constitutional amendment. I would support a court that overturns it. But to creatively get into that, I think, I'm really interested in what Montana's doing there, knowing that the Supreme Court is there to stop anything that they don't like. The other thing I think that is unexplored is that I think really can't be struck down on First Amendment grounds is also much tighter rules on, people are giving that money out because they want something. Now, sometimes they want tax breaks or something, or less regulated. Again, this is private service. It's not public service. It's private service. And by the way, it's corrupt. It's a corruption more broadly of public service into public power for private use. But a lot of the corruption is straight up, we get money from what you do, and you get that money back as contributions. That's what ECOP was. That's what vouchers, I'm sure, in the end will prove to be. You give us some of the public money to the private entity, and you get a lot of money back from us to keep you in power. So it's just a cycle of corruption and what I would call private service. I think there's more you can do that isn't a First Amendment problem around the way the state gives out money, and adding all sorts of limitations on, hey, if you're a vendor for the state, you can't do X, you can't do Y. A lot more disclosure. So I think some of the corruption of states, you could also do it through tying your contracting processes and your vending processes and your process of giving out money to entities to all, if Jobs Ohio is giving out money to a company, shouldn't we at least know if that company gave money to the politicians? Like, there's a lot you can do there that doesn't even get into, and I don't think that's something, since the company is choosing to get public money, I don't think the Supreme Court can say, in giving public money, you can't even ask for information or maybe limitations on what they can give. So I do think there's other reforms as well, but the Montana one, I think, is a really interesting one, and I hope it actually bears fruit, obviously.
Yeah.
Good question.
Steve would like to know, are there avenues, basically your thoughts on the corruption in the Supreme Court right now? Are there the federal Supreme Court?
Sorry, did I say that? I'm going to get this part.
Are there avenues for impeaching and removing Supreme Court justices? What are those avenues?
There are, but they all rely on votes in the House and Senate that we don't have. It's
Well, that's not how to get to a better place with the federal Supreme Court.
I mean, at this point, I'm quite bold about reform. I think court reform. Let's put it this way. Again, we always let them surprise us. Why don't we surprise them? Think about what they're. So we won for the first time, and this is, people can tell me I did good things or bad things as the chair of the Democratic Party. I'd say my best thing that I did was we won 3 Supreme Court races in 2 years and got ourselves a 4-3 court with a moderate Chief Justice that struck down gerrymandering. Very proud of that. So what happened? What happened once we did that? Court reform. They didn't think twice about it. The minute we won, I'm mad about this, the minute Jennifer Bruner won, and they knew what it meant for the first time of maybe our lifetimes, or 20 or 30 years, they had a check and balance in the Ohio Supreme Court, because Maureen O'Connor is a real justice, and the 3 Democratic endorsed candidates were real justices. Within months, we need court reform. And they not only added partisan labels to the ballot, which as a lawyer is horrific, they manipulated the ballot, just like they did around the issue 1 last year. And they moved the races to the top of the ballot. Because they wanted these races to become as partisan as all the others. And they called it court reform. And when we bring up court reform in the federal, oh my God, they're meddling. Like, you did it in a heartbeat. The minute you lost your control of the court. So yeah, I think we should be thinking about different types of court reform. Because it's totally broken. And I would have said this a long time ago, but I think that the decision of life tenure always made sense to me. But now it just seems to me that people like Alito and Thomas, every year they go by, they're more off in some bubble, so far removed from the world that they get worse. And so, at some point, I don't like the 70-year-old judges in Ohio to retire. I think some of the wisest people I've known are above 70. So I think I don't want to get carried away with it, but there is something really, really, like the fact that Alito and Thomas are off in these far-right weird groups, they seem to be completely removed from American society, yet they are determining so much. So I think things around court reform, ethics, disclosure, I wish Roberts would lean more on this stuff. Like, yes, there's a lot that can be done there. And every time we bring it up, they yell, you're doing this. I'm like, you did court reform the minute you lost power. And the sad news is it worked. They got exactly what they wanted. We now, the reason I made that quip about the court, we now have an intensely partisan Ohio Supreme Court. Their candidates run as partisan as they can. And they basically they literally ran campaigns in 24. We will do what the legislature says. And when I say we have no rule of law, it's because we do not have an Ohio Supreme Court that, if faced with the current gerrymander map, would strike it down. And that's not the rule of law, because this map is totally unconstitutional.
So we do have a lot of curiosity about your time as the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party. I guess what I'd like to know is anything that you're particularly proud of, anything that was particularly frustrating, an effort, something that you put a lot of effort into.
So I learned a lot. So one of the things you know about me is I'm kind of an outsider. Like, when I ran for city council in Cincinnati in 2001, I had not been involved in politics. I had just moved back. I actually worried they were going to call me a carpetbagger. I moved back, and I clerked for the 6th Circuit. A great man named Nathaniel Jones from Youngstown, longtime civil rights hero. I clerked for him. And then you may remember that City of Cincinnati had terrible problems around 1999-2000. A number of controversial police shootings that led to riots in our streets. And I ran for office because I thought, hey, I grew up proud of Cincinnati. I was literally in law school, I was named most likely to be president of the Cincinnati Board of Tourism. Because I would brag about Cincinnati. I know we are. So I moved back, I'm like, my city's falling apart. And I think that politics is supposed to have public service. So I'm going to run. I had never done anything in the party, nothing. So I kind of was an outsider to everything. And I hate to say it, like the book Laboratories of Autocracy, in many ways, you may see this a little bit, it's sort of my own little journey of a nonpartisan guy who did it for public service. I love my service in city council. I love my service in county commission. It was public service. But then when I ran higher for state auditor, and started to learn about the State House and became party chair. I was like, my God, this is horrible. And so the book I've written is, and the good news is because I started as an outsider, you can hear it, I still have the horror about how it works here. So I say all that to say, like, I became party chair, still kind of as an outsider. And so I had to learn a lot as I went. I would do things differently, knowing what I know now. But the things I would say I'm most proud of was, even though I hadn't written these books yet, that we did run in every district in 2018. And 2018 was the only cycle where we gained State House seats, despite the gerrymander. We gained 6. I'm very proud of that. And the State House did a very good job of contesting every district. The most proud I was, though, and it's been gutted, was I was obsessed. I always have been. I started writing novels because I hate gerrymandering so much. And I was very proud that although not perfect, we were able to pass 2 referenda around gerrymandering, but then especially importantly, elect a Supreme Court that would enforce them. And the tragedy of this state was that in 2021 and 22, the court did its job, but this State House gutted the court. But if I look back at like the contribution, I was very proud to work with Mia Lewis, and so many of you all knows. They weren't perfect. They weren't an independent commission. An independent commission had been tried and failed in 2012, so we knew we couldn't bring it back right away. But if they hadn't gutted the court, those reforms could have stuck. I was very proud to re-elect Sheriff Brown. And I will say this, and this is especially important given that we're getting a midterm. Our 2018 was the best year we've had since Obama got re-elected. So Sheriff wins by 7. We win 2 Supreme Court seats. We pick up 6 State House seats. That sounds pretty good now, right? And Cordray just missed 3.5 points. We had the highest midterm turnout in our cities in decades. And that's the part right now, to be really honest, I'm most worried about, is our urban turnout has collapsed. And I look back at 18, and we have to figure out, and I've talked to my team from then about this, we had a sky-high turnout in our cities in 2018. Numbers that were so good that at 7 p.m. Richard Cordray thought he would be governor. Now, there was a high rural turnout, too, and that offset it. But I was very proud that however Sheriff Brown's team and Cordray's team and the State House team had worked, that race did lead to a very high midterm turnout, which I think in this environment next year, if we can replicate it, I think we win Ohio. I honestly do. If we replicate 24-22, which was an anemic turnout, we are going to succeed. So that turnout in 18, and the final thing I'll say is, the other thing I did was I thought, I learned this. This is what I learned over time. The party chair role of a state is the worst job imaginable. Okay? When your candidate wins, everyone loves the candidate, and they did it. And when your candidate loses, they disappear, and it's the chair's fault. Okay? It's the worst job ever. Okay? And I figured, and by the way, half the stuff you have no control over. Joe Biden, he didn't really try and win Ohio in 2020. He did. They dropped a little bit of money here to make it look like they were, but I literally spent months saying, can you please try to look like you're winning Ohio? Like you're trying to win? Because if you don't look like you're trying, no one's going to show up. And they tried even less than 24. So you're kind of, in many ways, on the outside looking into some of these much bigger players. And you're begging and pleading. But when it goes south, it's your fault as the chair that the problem happened. So knowing that I didn't control that much, the thing I learned that I would tell any chair to do is, what are things that you as a chair do control? Whatever those national players do. And that's when I decided, well, let's focus on Supreme Court races. Because no one outside of here can tell us what to do there, and we can win. And so when Joe Biden wasn't really paying attention to Ohio, I did whatever they wanted me to do. But you know what my focus was? Jennifer Berner. That was our obsession. We focused on that race. We did everything we could, and she won by 10 when Trump won by 8. The biggest overperformance in the country of a state Trump won was Jennifer Berner. And that's the thing we control. And with that, we won the court, as I talked about. But so you can pick, learning how to pick your battles of what you control, that no one can tell you what to do or not to do. And the other thing I did around that was something we were very proud of called the Main Street Initiative. Local government, local training, helping win locally. And I did this because as a city council member, I got no interaction with the Ohio Democratic Party, none. I finished first place out of 30 in that first race. No one even knew who I was. And I thought, what is this? This is the future of the party. This is local government. So beginning 2017, I created Main Street, which we called, that was our short term for it. And we would invite people from all over the state to run for local office. And we would train them. And then we'd do everything we could to help them live turnout. And I can tell you, for the 5 years we did that, just like last night, we literally took cities that Trump won 70-30, and the next year we won the mayor's races by about the same amount. Reynoldsburg, which was very red when I started, it's completely blue now. One of our most important Main Street projects was electing 4 African American women to the city council of Reynoldsburg, and one of those women won the city of Reynoldsburg clerk's, I think, was an auditor's race yesterday. 60-40 over MAGA guy. So we flipped Cuyahoga Falls. So I once was at a board of realtors meeting, and I was talking about we are really going in on Main Street, and I said we won all over. I was kind of bragging. This guy, an LGBTQ fire captain, won a seat in Lebanon, Ohio. And I said we won a seat in Lebanon. And a conservative guy in the audience said, "Which seat did you win?" I don't remember any Democrats winning. And I said, so-and-so. He said, "Oh, she's a Democrat. I didn't even know that. She's great." But the point is, maybe the most proud thing is that we went around the state and we helped people win locally. And all those folks who were lost have gone on to great careers in public service. Some have gone to run for state house. And that was something, again, that you could control as a party chair amid many things at the much higher level, that you try and help on, but you don't control as much.
Well, as we're wrapping up this evening, I feel like you've given us a lot of things to be hopeful and to feel positively about tonight. You know, if you had just one last thing that's giving you hope right now, what would that be?
So I did, by the way, if anyone's on Substack, I run a Substack. If you're interested in the kinds of thing I'm talking about, look up David Pepper or Pep Perspectives and you'll see it. So last night, and I wrote this last night, and you will experience this here. When I ran for the county commission, I was the first person to turn our commission majority blue in 40 years. I probably lost a township of 15,000 people called Anderson Township. I doubt I hit 40%. Last night they swept the school board races in Anderson Township, and they swept the township trustee votes. This is the Republican heart of Hamilton County. In Mason, Mason, Ohio, Warren County. These are the places where Republicans don't just win, they run at the margins and win them Ohio. We were the top 2 finishers in Mason's city council, the top 2 finishers in Mason school board. We flipped a Westchester township, the largest township in Ohio. Kamala got the 44% of that township. We flipped a seat there. The collar, now we have to lose by less in rural, but it's still harder. But we got to do what Obama did. We got to get to like 40% and not be at 28%. And that means we got to run in those places and be on message, even if we don't win. Like it's the being there gets you up there, as Obama showed. But if you look at the map of Ohio, where they used to crush us was Delaware County, Warren County, Union County, large suburban Republican counties. And all around this country, and last night around Ohio and Hamilton County, the places where they run up their biggest margins didn't just get close, and we won them. And by the way, where did that also happen? November 23, on the Reproductive Freedom Amendment. And August of 23, where Greene County went with us. Geauga County went with us. Butler County was 50-50. So yes, we are losing in some places, and our turnout isn't what it needs to be. We've got to fix that. But if you take the collar counties around our big cities, and you put a circle around, you have a bunch of them up here, Almost every county, I think every county abutting Franklin County got to the mid-40s or higher in November of 23. You're taking away their margins where they have to run up big numbers, and that's how you win. And what we are seeing is, women in particular are driving this. And if we can, in November 26, build on those wins and build on, when Trump's in the ballot, it clearly messes everything up, so the math is different. Clearly. So 28 is different. We'll see what happens in 28. Maybe if it's not Trump, it's different. But in the other years, the growth that we are seeing, particularly with women in these collar counties, is significant. It takes away the margins they need to win Ohio. It's like taking their knees out from under them. And so last night's numbers in those areas is an enormous trend. And if we can hold our losses in rural to high 30s or 40s, make sure we replicate what we did in 18 in the urban areas, which is maybe the most work we have to do. Okay, that is a lot to do, and we got to do some deep digging. And again, it's like young people. It's not taking people for granted and thinking knocking on the door the last week is going to impress anybody. It's having long conversations with people who decided maybe voting doesn't matter in their life to get them back in. But the trend in these collar counties is the big shift that makes it, if we do our job, much, much harder. And I'll give a plug here. This is why I think the Sherrod Brown 80 active ticket is the best ticket we've had since 06. Because it perfectly energizes the combination of voters I'm talking about. And so I'm a big fan of that ticket. I think it's, again, we won in 06. 26 is 06. It's the second midterm of an unpopular Republican president. That's the best. I'll take 18, by the way, because I think doing better with women voters in these suburbs would actually would help us have won in 18. But if this is more like 06, and we have a combination on a ticket that is appealing directly to those women that are firing us up in all these collar counties, that's the path to victory. So I think Ohio really, and every poll is showing this already. And Vivek Ramaswamy is the most flawed candidate, except for billions of dollars, you have ever seen. That you put together Sherrod and Amy against Vivek and John Husted, and the trends that we're seeing in collar counties, and all of a sudden we have our best shot of turning Ohio blue. How's that?